Bruce drives his car for his job. The equation R equals 0.575n plus 42 models the relation between the amount in dollars R that is reimbursed and the number of miles n he drives one day. Find the amount Bruce is reimbursed on a day when he drives 0 miles. So here we have an employee, Bruce, who uses his car for his job. So his company pays him. How much they pay him? Well, they pay him depending on the number of miles driven. So they pay him R amount in dollars depending on the number of miles. Okay? So R gives us the money, the dollar amount, and N would be the number of miles. So the amount he gets reimbursed depends a lot on what? On the number of miles he drives for his work. So what does that mean when Bruce drives 0 miles? That means N must be equal to 0. Because remember, N is a number of miles. So when N is 0, how much would he reimburse? Well, R gives me the amount that Bruce is reimbursed. So I need to plug in 0 for N and find out how much he'll be reimbursed. So R would be equal to 0.575. N is 0, so times 0. I'm just using this equation, plus 42. So then R becomes equal to 0.575 times 0, that's just 0, plus 42. So R is equal to 42. So what does this mean? When Bruce drives 0 miles, he will be reimbursed $42. So this is how much he'll be reimbursed. So Bruce is reimbursed $42 when he drives 0 miles. Now find the amount Bruce is reimbursed on a day when he drives 220 miles. So now we know how many miles he drives. So N is equal to 220 miles. Again, to find out how much he will be reimbursed, I need to plug in 220 in the equation. So R is equal 0.575 N. N now is 220 miles. So I have to replace N with 220 plus 42. So now you can bring your calculator and you multiply 0.575 by 220 to get the value. So R gives us $126.05 or 50 cents plus 42. So R, you just add those up. 126.5 plus 42 gives you $168.05. So what does that mean? Bruce is reimbursed $168.50 when he drives 220 miles. Part C. Interpret the slope and the r-intercept of the equation. Now, before we answer this question, let's go ahead and talk about the y-intercept. Remember, like if you go back to the xy system, here you have the x-axis, and here you have the y-axis, right? And if you have a line that passes through, like this is the line right here, this is right here is your y-intercept. We call this B, right? So as an ordered pair, this would be 0B as an ordered pair, right? Now, to write an equation for this line, y, let's just say this equation would be y equal mx plus b. B is your y-intercept right here. The variable you have here is the same as this one right here in the x-axis. And the variable here, y, is the same as the one on the y-axis, right? So here, the y-intercept is when x is equal to 0. When x is equal to 0, y would be equal to b. Now, in our equation here, we have, what do we have in equation? The equation here gives us what? The number of miles, so this would be n, and now our equation is what? R. So I'll write it down. R, they gave us R to be 0.575 n plus 42. So again, this is n right here. That's a variable. It replaced x, so now it's n here. And the axis here, the y-axis, or should I say the r-axis here, is the same as the variable right here. And this one would be your r-intercept. Okay? So if the graph looks like this, then this would be 42. Or in other words, it would be 0, 42 if you want to write it as an ordered pair. Right? Okay? And then if you remember, this is your slope. So this one also would be the slope. Okay? So now the slope is what? The slope is 0.575. And the r-intercept is 42. Now, how do we interpret them? Okay, so let's see. The slope, let me write it down. The slope is equal to 0.575. Okay, I can go ahead and write it over 1. Right? So here, 0.575, that's then R, which is the money right here. And 1 here represents N, which is the number of miles. So what does that mean? It means R, since the slope is positive, that means R increases by $0.575 when the number of miles driven, the number of miles driven, we're using N, increases by 1. R increases by 0.575 when the number of mile increases by 1. So Bruce will be reimbursed additional 0.575 for every additional 1 mile. So it increases by this amount for every 1 mile. So we just interpreted the slope. Now let's go ahead and talk about the r-intercept. The r-intercept here means that when the number of miles driven is 0, so that point here, 0.42. When the number of miles driven 0, okay, the amount reimbursed is $42. When the number of miles driven is 0, the amount reimbursed is $42. You can also see it from this equation. If you replace, instead of n 0, 0 is 0.575, that gives you 0. So immediately this goes away. R, which is the amount reimbursed, is $42 here.